Now, Philbert Baguma is here with me in studio. We are going to be talking about President Museveni's speech yesterday. The president hinted that March 1st, the schools shall be reopened for non-candidate learners. Senior 3, that is primary 6, senior 5, and senior 3. Yes, primary 6, yes. Senior 3, and senior 5. Now, the question is, if the president is saying the academic year shall end in July, yes, what about these students in primary 1, primary 2, primary 3, and primary 4? What about these learners in senior 1, senior 2? Yes, what fate is going to befall these students if the academic year is going to end in July? Philbert Baguma, that's the $64,000 question. Very good morning.
Good morning.
So there is no roadmap whatsoever. The parents are confused even after getting this announcement that on February 4th that
Yes.
schools shall be reopening on March 1st.
Yes.
It caught them off guard. Some of them had eaten the school fees in December. The little that had been left was finished in January. What are we looking at?
First of all, the president made it very clear that the academic year for 2020 will be ending in July 2021. That is a question that has been unanswered for quite some time. Now, this address should have come up with a roadmap. Because when we say the academic year is ending in July, we have only talked about semi-candidate classes which are reporting on 1st March. How about these other classes? Because we shall be remaining with 3 months. Now, what will be their fate? Because the academic year should cover each and every class. So that is something the Ministry of Education and Sports should work out.
Meaning these students would have been at home for over a year without any kind of education.
Exactly.
So their fate on promotion.
Promotion, since the effect is cutting across, promotion wouldn't be a very big problem, because that would mean developing a program that would bridge the gap in terms of concepts, because we are looking at the content that was supposed to be covered by these learners. And therefore, all the learners across board were affected. So if we say they are going to be promoted, then there should be a program that is going to help them cover what they did not cover in the previous classes. Otherwise, if that is not done, we are going to have confusion
in the newly promoted classes
because
they didn't study.
You will have 2 classes at a time running concurrently, and you may not manage that. So you can have a program where the children transit to the next class. That is, if they get some time between now and July, so that they also have some work covered, then the remaining work that should have been covered in the current classes where they are would be catered for in the next classes. Because remember, some of them have been at home for long and they have overgrown. And some of them will say, I cannot remain in this class which I have been in. So that would be
a problem. And according to the cabinet resolution I saw on February 1st, it seems like they're not going to do any examinations, especially for those primary 6, senior 3, senior 5, first year and continuing students. Seems like promotion is going to be based on absenteeism. That's what they are saying. It's going to be based on who is actually appearing in the classes to study. So if you're absent in the class, you have to study in that class again. But if you've been regularly showing up to those classes, you'll be promoted. Don't you think that is a problem, where you'll end up with students that are not savvy with the notes and so forth, but being promoted to the next class?
Well, there will be some sort of assessment, because you cannot simply move. Yes,
on regular attendance.
In primary schools, there is automatic promotion, but also, even when we talk of automatic promotion, sometimes there are those who are not really ready to be promoted. But that is a discussion between the parent and the learner.
I see.
But in these other classes, there is where there is a need for that assessment, so that even when they are transiting, you know who is where and how to help them. Otherwise, if we say no exams at all, then it would bring.
But is it right to base
confusion.
promotion of students on attendance, regular attendance to classes?
Attendance and learning are two different things.
Because you don't know the reason why I'm not at school. It could be something that, you know, I can't, you know, change.
You see, when you are being in class and studying are two different things.
Indeed.
So the child may be ever in class, but not attentive and not learning.
I hear you.
But we can have someone who is genuinely absent from school
Because of poverty.
because of issues that are beyond control from home. But this child, even when the child has attended 3 times in a week, if you assess the one who has attended 5 times and the one who has attended 3 times, you get shocked, because this one of 3 times may beat the one of 5 times. But that does not mean that the children should be absent from school. But when we are condemning that, we need to look at the reasons that make these children or these learners absent from school. Yes.
And of course, when we allowed the candidate learners to show up, that is primary 7, senior 4, and senior 6, and also the third-year students at the university, it was hard for some schools. They're actually still shut down. Some schools did not receive candidate learners because they were unable to apply the SOPs that had been fronted by the Ministry of Education and also the Ministry of Health. So with all these other candidates showing up, the non-candidate learners, don't you think there's going to be a huge problem when it comes to implementation of SOPs? If it was hard when there were few, where's the assurance that it will be done when there are many?
Obviously, that's why the gradual reopening becomes a good idea.
I see.
Because it does not exert a lot of pressure on the schools. Managing a school is complex, because even when you have one class, there are certain payments that remain constant. For example, electricity. If you have one class, you will be consuming the same electricity like you have the whole school open. Because, I mean, security lights will be on, and lights in the classrooms will be on.
So same charges despite
you will have a gatekeeper, you will have a librarian, you will have cooks, and therefore managing a school with one class is very, very complex. So the schools that failed to reopen because of the numbers, for example, if you have a primary school and you have about 30 candidates in primary 7, it is practically impossible to run that school, save for government schools where government released 1.5 million for the standard operating procedures. And therefore, I now make an assumption that they are going to add on what they had bought, because the numbers have increased. Maybe you may need more temperature guns, more hand-washing facilities, and therefore government needs to look into that, so that
they have 3 weeks to do that.
The schools do not cripple. So we need better preparation for these others. But also, it is paramount that the government comes out with a roadmap for these other classes, so that the parents also get prepared. The parents have been asking, should I use the school fees, or the schools are about to open? And that preparation is very necessary. Even the children should be prepared psychologically, and the teachers, to know that on such and such a date, I am going to school. And therefore, they start switching off from what they have been doing and start thinking of the teaching and learning process. Even when we had the lockdown, when these TV lessons and radio lessons began, the learners were excited, and some of them who get signals were doing it. But as of now, they have lost morale and nobody's bothered about them. So there is a need to create that anxiety in them that they are about to go back to school, and then they start preparing. Now, when we go to school, the teachers will need support, even the learners, because we need psychosocial support mechanism.
Indeed.
They are going back, but they are still having that fear. What will happen? Now, the season we are in is dusty. We are going to have very many cases with the flu, our normal flu. And when
when you sneeze, everyone runs.
When you sneeze, everyone runs away and says this is COVID. So Ministry of Health, together with the Ministry of Education and Sports,
yes, sir,
need also to get other stakeholders so that there is that support mechanism and they can identify the flu which is
normal,
which is normal, and the flu which is a sign of COVID-19, yes, so that we don't have commotion within the school setup.
All right. In the wake of government's lack of preparedness and also the parents being caught unaware, as you, the educationist, do you support government's move to reopen schools now that we have skyrocketing numbers of COVID-19 infections at 39,735?
It was overdue, actually. Because when government started reopening some sectors, the markets are open, the churches are open, public transport is open. Now, when you go to all those places, the learners are all over. If you go to the streets, the learners are all over. If you go to the playgrounds, from morning to evening, the learners are there playing football. And therefore, at this point in time, the learners can be safer when they are being monitored within the school setup than where they are. You have heard of pregnancies, you have heard of marriages, and all that. So the learners have suffered, the parents are tortured psychologically, and therefore it was high time that government started reopening gradually. We have a roadmap, and then we get to know that this is going to be done this way. Because the reports now indicate that the positive cases are slowing down from almost 1,000.
Actually, they're not slowing down because of low infection rates, because we are not testing as much as we used to.
Even when they were high, the testing was not for everybody.
They were targeted.
And therefore, so when we look at the situation, we shall say the cases have lowered down.
So the new normal COVID-19 is here, and we have to live with it. So
yes.
So on the issue of preparedness, let me take you back to the issue of preparedness in the schools. Now, the academic year is ending July. The academic year 2020 is ending in July. Yes. So you have the candidates who are leaving March 31st, that is PLE, and you also have UCE on April 6th. So we shall have the non-candidate class learners go to the schools on March 1st. But then the question is, if these schools are not ready to implement the SOPs, if they do not have the resources, the money, the finances to put in place all these facilities that will ensure resolute like the students abide by the SOPs, so do you think we shall end up in a situation whereby students, even those who have been allowed to go back, do not show up to these schools simply because they did not reopen and they do not have the money to do so?
First of all, to a larger extent, most of the schools and education institutions are open. Yes, there are those who which failed to open, but there are few.
For the candidate learners.
Those who opened for the candidate learners were given certificates of compliance. The certificate of compliance was based on a certain percentage. It did not necessarily mean you have to have 100%. But I have that assurance that those schools which opened for candidate classes are at a certain level in terms of implementation of standard operating procedures. Therefore, if government gives more resources to add on the standard operating procedures, then the schools can now manage the numbers.
So
that
you're
will be
talking about
coming.
the schools that were able to receive the candidates. I'm
To
talking
receive.
about schools that were unable to even receive the candidate learners. Now you're telling them that they can now receive the non-candidate class learners, yet they did not even receive the candidates. So you end up with a situation where most students are going to be disenfranchised and they're not going to show up to schools.
Obviously, we are dealing with a new normal. And of course, there are some casualties that will be found along the way. Where the schools is unable, then the learners should use the opportunity to go to the next school.
So leave that school that was unable to receive candidates and go to a school that is already open.
Yes, that is already open. Because nobody is going to say, don't come here. Because there are schools. But by the way, when you look at the schools, if you grade them, you will realize when we use one size fits all, it won't work for us. Because there are schools which can even have the whole school in session and they manage even the social distancing aspect. Therefore, we need to look at the schools and categorize them. And that will inform even the roadmap we are talking about.
All right, as we wrap up, Mr. Philbert Baguma, give the resolutions from the educationists to the government using that camera right there. Your your recommendations.
Our recommendations as an institution is that, one, we need to have more engagement of stakeholders in this process. We need to have a roadmap so that it guides the parents, it guides the learners, it guides the teachers on which way to go. And then the issue of exams, whether there are exams or no exams, should be very clear, because you will find the schools which are able to have these exams in place. If we say don't give exams, we shall have scenarios where schools are giving exams and others not giving exams, because you know what happens in this country of ours. And the ministries of education and health should come up with a mechanism of giving support, psychosocial support mechanism, so that the teachers and the learners and the entire school community are in place to manage the current situation, the new normal, so that we don't have commotion in schools.
Very insightful conversation with Philbert Baguma. Many thanks for having made the time to speak to NTV Uganda.
Thank you.
All right. And we also do know that, yes, some schools, even before reopening, were open. And that could only go ahead to increase the educational or knowledge gap that we've been grappling with, from the rich students getting more knowledge at the expense of the poor students who hail from very, very disadvantaged backgrounds. There is more that needs to be done to increase or bridge the equity gap right here in Uganda on so many social issues. My name is Romy Busiku. To all those kings, queens, boys and girls who are celebrating their birthdays today, please do go out there and celebrate, but be cognizant of the fact that COVID-19 is still rearing its very ugly head at 39,735 infection rates being recorded right here in Uganda. And on the international scene, 104.9 million plus cases have been registered. Very good morning. Be safe.